The icy wind whispered through the bare branches of the trees as Lauren and Tommy walked hand in hand along the dark road. The town of Oak Ridge, shrouded in the silence of Valentine's night, seemed like a ghost of itself. Dim lights from the houses alternated with unsettling shadows, creating an atmosphere of tension that the two couldn't ignore. They had been dating for 2 years, a passionate love born on the benches of the University of Oregon. Their happiness was contagious, a beacon of hope in that small village nestled among the mountains. That evening, they decided to celebrate Valentine's Day at an Italian restaurant. The food was delicious, the atmosphere romantic, but a dark premonition haunted them. It felt like a veil of unease had settled over the town, as if an imminent danger awaited them. Exiting the restaurant, the starry sky enveloped them in a mantle of romance. But as they walked the usual path back home, an unsettling sensation overcame them. The warm lights that illuminated the path had gone out, replaced by unnatural darkness. The shadows of the trees twisted sinisterly, as if dancing to a macabre tune. "What's happening?" Lauren asked, her voice trembling. Tommy tried to reassure her, but terror grew in him like a poisonous ivy. Suddenly, a hooded figure emerged from the shadows, blocking their way. "I finally found you," a hoarse and distorted voice hissed. Other hooded figures joined the first, surrounding the two. They were men armed with knives and rods. Their intent was clear. They wanted to harm Lauren and Tommy. The two clung to each other, knowing that their only hope was to defend themselves together. They fought with courage and determination, using every object they could find for defense. The battle was exhausting, a succession of screams, blows, and injuries. Lauren fell to the ground, struck by a rod to the head. Tommy lunged at his assailant, screaming with rage and pain. He managed to disarm him, but another man stabbed him in the back with a knife. Tommy fell to the ground, bleeding. Lauren dragged herself towards him, trying to stop the bleeding. "Don't leave me," Tommy whispered, tears in his eyes. "I'll never leave you," Lauren replied, holding him close. The two embraced, aware that their lives were coming to an end. They exchanged a final kiss, full of love and pain. The hooded figures watched them die without mercy. Then they disappeared into the night, leaving behind only 2 lifeless bodies and a tragic mystery. The story of Lauren and Tommy quickly spread in the small community of Oak Ridge, becoming a sad and romantic legend. The two were remembered as heroes, united in love even in death. Every year on Valentine's Day, the townspeople visited the site of their murder to leave flowers and memories. Their story served as a warning against violence and an anthem to eternal love. The scent of cinnamon and chocolate enveloped Rita and Dylan's house in Cary, North Carolina. Valentine's evening had finally arrived, and their small home was a love nest. Soft lights, lit candles, and a carefully set table created a romantic and intimate atmosphere. Rita, in a blue dress giving her a sensual air, was busy in the kitchen for the final touches to the dinner. Dylan, in a sweater and jeans, watched her with an enamored smile. It had been 2 years since they had been together, and their love was still alive and passionate as the first day. After a delightful dinner of porcini mushroom risotto and green peppercorn steak, they settled on the couch to watch a romantic movie. Their hands intertwined, and their gazes frequently met, filled with passion and camaraderie. The movie had just begun when a sudden noise shattered the silence of the house. A dull thud came from the kitchen. Dylan got up, concerned. "What could that be?" Rita asked in a hushed voice. "I don't know," Dylan replied. "I'll go check." He headed towards the kitchen, his heart pounding in his chest. A dark shadow moved in the corner of the room. Dylan approached cautiously, holding a knife he had taken from the table. "Is anyone there?" he asked with a trembling voice. The shadow moved again, and Dylan distinguished a tall, thin figure dressed in black. The figure turned towards him, and Dylan shivered in terror. The intruder's face was horrifying, a mask of decaying flesh with yellow eyes that glowed like burning coals. A sharp blade protruded from his hand. "What do you want?" Dylan asked in a faint voice. The intruder didn't respond. He lunged at Dylan with an animalistic roar. Dylan tried to defend himself with the knife, but he was too weak and scared. The intruder struck him with the blade, making him fall to the ground. Dylan writhed in pain, blood staining his shirt. Drawn by the screams, Rita arrived in the kitchen and saw the horrifying scene. A scream of terror escaped her throat. The intruder turned towards her, jaws wide open in a devilish smile. Rita stiffened with fear, unable to move. The intruder approached her, the blade gleaming in the dim light. Rita closed her eyes, awaiting the fatal blow. But the blow didn't come. A moment later, she heard a dull thud and opened her eyes. The intruder was on the ground, motionless. Dylan stood over him, the knife in his hand. "Dylan!" exclaimed Rita, running towards him. Dylan embraced her, trembling and in tears. "It's all over," he whispered. "I killed him." They looked into each other's eyes, both shocked by what had happened. Their romantic evening had turned into a nightmare of blood and terror. They left the house and sought refuge in the cold night. The house was now a place of terror, tainted by the presence of the monster. They didn't know what had happened or where that horrible intruder had come from. But one thing was certain. Their lives would never be the same. The love that bound them had been horribly tested, but had endured. They held on to each other, aware that only together could they overcome that traumatic experience. The dawn found them still embraced, trembling but united, while the city of Cary woke up unaware of the horror that had unfolded in their home. Phil and Rachel, two youngsters from Flint, ventured into the woods with loaded backpacks and pounding hearts. It was Valentine's evening, and they had decided to spend it in an intimate campsite, surrounded only by the wild nature. Phil, with his infectious smile and mischievous gaze, was confident in winning Rachel over with his adventurous spirit. Rachel, with her auburn hair and emerald green eyes, was captivated by T-Phil's mysterious charm and his enthusiasm for outdoor life. After an hour of walking, immersed in the muffled silence of the snowy forest, they found the perfect clearing. A small frozen lake shimmered in the center, surrounded by snow-laden pine trees. Phil lit a crackling fire, and Rachel prepared steaming hot chocolate. They shared life stories, laughed, and exchanged glances full of complicity. The fire created an intimate atmosphere, and the dancing shadows on their faces added a touch of mystery. Suddenly, the sound of breaking branches shattered the silence. A chill ran down their spines, but Phil hurried to reassure her. "It's probably just a deer." Rachel nodded, trying to hide her unease. At that moment, a figure emerged from the shadow of the trees. It was a tall, slender woman with long, black-as-night hair. Her light eyes gleamed with an evil light. Phil recognized her with horror. It was Pamela, his ex-girlfriend, a possessive and obsessive woman who had never accepted their breakup. Pamela stared at them with a chilling smile. "I finally found you," she said in a hoarse voice. "You won't think you can get away that easily." Phil stood in front of Rachel, trying to protect her. "What do you want from us?" he asked, his voice trembling. Pamela approached with feline steps, her tall and ghostly figure outlined against the fire. "I want you," she said, fixing Phil with a lustful gaze. "And you," she added, turning to Rachel. "I'll eliminate." In an instant, she pulled out a knife. Phil lunged at her, trying to disarm her, but she was too agile and strong. She struck him in the chest with unprecedented violence, causing him to fall to the ground. Rachel screamed in terror. She tried to escape, but Pamela reached her in a few steps. She grabbed her by the hair and dragged her toward the frozen lake. "I won't let you win!" Rachel shouted, tears in her eyes. She struggled with all her might, but Pamela was too strong. She violently pushed her onto the fragile ice, which broke with a dull thud. Rachel fell into the icy waters, screaming in terror. Phil, wounded and in pain, crawled toward the lake, trying to help her, but it was too late. Rachel sank into the freezing waters, swallowed by the darkness. Phil remained alone, kneeling on the ice, with Rachel's lifeless body lying a few meters away from him. His pain was inconsolable, his soul torn by the loss of the woman he loved. Pamela watched them with a cruel smile. She had finally gotten what she wanted. Phil was alone and desperate, just as she had desired. She turned and walked away into the woods, leaving Phil alone with his grief and Rachel's icy body in his arms. Valentine's evening had turned into a nightmare of blood and death, a nightmare that Phil would never forget.